Welcome everybody back to There Will Be Bets. This is your episode for the NFL Conference Championship Games. I'm your host, Cole Oxane. As always, I'm joined by my co-hosts, Jake LaSalle and Drew LaSalle, and we're back for another big week of football. Boys, it's getting down to the end of the season. There's only 3 games left. We had the national championship this week, so that was one of the 4 games remaining, down to 3 total football games left until next season. It's always a little sad for me when we get to this time of year because I'm so used to the long days, and now all of a sudden you just wait for 1 or 2 games in the afternoon, and it starts to be a little bit of a drag. But hopefully these are going to be some good games, particularly that NFC game I know that we're all pretty excited for. Well, we're going to hop in. We're going to cover some storylines. We're going to probably break down a little bit of the games that we saw last week, and then we'll jump into some coaching news. And then, obviously, as always, we're going to jump into breaking down both the games. There's going to be no best bets out of us this week. There's only 2 games. It's hard to really find 3 best bets in 2 games, but we will break down all of the games coming up. We're going to break them down from a spread perspective, a total perspective, and a props perspective to give as much of an angle as we can give and give out as many plays that we're looking at as possible going into Sunday. So without further ado, we'll jump in, we'll look back a little bit, cover the biggest storylines going on in the league. Obviously, a lot going on right now with teams getting eliminated, all of the coaching carousel news, but I think the biggest news, hands down, has to be this Bo Nix injury. Last offensive play of the game, Bo Nix breaks his ankle spotting the ball. Really unfortunate. You hate to see it happen. Fluke, weird, could happen to anybody at any time type of football injury. But here we are. We live in a world where now all of a sudden the 1 seed is a 5.5-point underdog in the conference championship game. The Broncos are going to have to start Jarrett Stidham at quarterback. Guys, what do we make of this? I know that we all we'll get to it when we break down the game. But we all kind of have a little bit more faith in Jarrett Stidham than maybe the general public does. But what do we think this means for the Broncos' chances at the Super Bowl now? And, how are we looking at this game? And do we think it should be the type of situation that we just write the Broncos off?
Really hard to believe that we're sitting here with a team that is the 1 seed in the AFC, has a home playoff game for a chance to go to the Super Bowl, and is sitting at 13-1 to win the Super Bowl. 2 games they have to win. It's a crazy number. It's a tempting number, but yeah, we'll talk about the game a little more in detail and what our thoughts are as far as where the number has gone. But for me, there's obviously a drop off to Stidham. You hate to see the injury happen to Bo Nix, but is there that much of a drop off? We'll get to that. But yeah, hate to see it for Bo Nix. Obviously, sounds like not too serious that it's going to affect his status for early next season, but the Broncos don't win on offense, so I expect Sean Payton to come out with a great game plan and put together something that hopefully we can all profit from.
This is a really tough break for the Broncos. It's obviously that's the worst case scenario on a play that, like Cole said, really didn't matter. It was just spotting the ball at the end of the game, and it's very tough for the Broncos. But like Drew said, I think that this team is a defensive team. They win on defense and with offensive scheme, and I feel like they'll be able to come out with a good game plan. We'll get into it more with the actual breakdown of the game, but I think that this team has a shot, and like Drew said, I feel like that 13-1 is a bit of an overreaction by everybody. But yeah, we'll get into it.
Yeah, and I think those who are sickos, like some of us on this podcast, will remember that Jarrett Stidham is not new to showing up big as an underdog. If I'm not mistaken, he was the last Auburn quarterback to beat Alabama back in, I don't know if it was the Kick 6 game or maybe they beat him one more time after that. I can't remember because Jarrett Stidham's been in the league a while, but I'm pretty sure he was the last Auburn quarterback to beat Alabama and Nick Saban. And I mean, the New England Patriots are basically the closest thing you're going to get to the Alabama Crimson Tide when it comes to the name brand and the dominance they've put in the modern NFL. So maybe we'll see something out of him. We'll turn back the clock to his college days. I agree with these guys. I don't necessarily think the drop-off we've seen in the betting line is equivalent to the drop-off in talent and the drop-off in trust that this team has from Jarrett Stidham. And there's kind of this thing, you probably have heard it before, one final note on this injury, is people talk about the Patrick Ewing theory. It's the idea that when your main star goes down, everybody kind of steps up at least for one game. Chances are we probably see something like that, especially in this charged up of a game, home game, the Denver atmosphere. You still have the altitude on your side. I think there's a lot of potential we see something like that. So again, we'll break it down all the nuts and bolts when we get to the matchup here.
He played, I didn't realize, I thought in my mind he played 5 years at Auburn. Guess it was only 2 years.
Yeah, he was at Baylor before that.
Yeah, he was at Baylor for a year. Looks like he got blown out in 2018, 52-21. But he did beat Alabama in 2017, 26-14. Yeah, put up a pedestrian 230 yards, no touchdowns, but a win is a win.
I mean, that sounds like the kind of stat line that if he puts it up this week, the Broncos could stand a chance.
For sure.
That's all I'm saying.
Who else saw the Nick Foles tweet about Patriots not good at facing backup quarterbacks in the postseason?
Yeah, that guy.
Yeah,
I think he's the only player that is unanimously loved by all of Philadelphia, a city that hates everyone.
It's actually incredible. Who would have thought Nick Foles? If you would have just thought about the trajectory of that guy's career, we'll get to that in the offseason. We'll talk about like big stories and like upsets and stuff like that when we get to the offseason. But Nick Foles, as some former Wildcats on this podcast, I know that he lives in the high regards. So we'll get to that stuff in the offseason. One thing that leading into the offseason, coming out of that Broncos game that not involving injuries, but some heads rolled, and that was the Buffalo Bills, obviously losing to Denver in that game. And I want to talk about a little bit of everything with the Bills here. Obviously, the big story. Sean McDermott out, fired as the Buffalo Bills head coach. Somehow Bean stays on as the GM. They didn't clean Full House. They only cleaned out McDermott, which is crazy to me. All of a sudden today, as we record this on Wednesday, January 21st, we got the ownership out here like dragging players publicly. There was this big thing where a member of the ownership group in front office was talking about how it was the coaching staff that wanted to draft Keon Coleman and basically making it sound like he's not welcome in Buffalo anymore despite being under contract, still on the roster, and arguably their wide receiver 1 or 2. On top of that, somehow going completely under the radar is the fact that Josh Allen did not play up to MVP level. He was good, don't get me wrong. Josh Allen's always going to be good, but he made some mistakes in this game that also cost him this game, possibly cost McDermott his job, and kind of created a very unnerving situation going into the offseason for Buffalo. So guys, take this however you want. Jake, I know there's one particular thing I didn't mention that you feel pretty strongly about, which could be the reffing as well. But let's take this in any direction possible, kind of unpack this giant box of horrors going on in Buffalo right now. But Jake, what's your take on the situation? Where do you want to go with this? What's your biggest note?
Yeah, there's a lot of finger pointing going on in Buffalo and just problems in general as it's just an organization imploding. But the main thing I wanted to talk about was, in fact, the reffing towards the end of the games. And we've talked about this multiple times on the podcast, how refs are just becoming a problem, especially towards the end of games. They just keep sticking their nose in the end of games, and it's just frustrating. You watch 4 quarters, or in this case, 4 quarters and overtime of football, and then they decide, hey, let's throw 3 flags on a drive and decide the end of the game. Yeah, in that Bills game, there was a catch/interception that was a controversial call, and then 2 pass interference and a roughing the passer controversial calls, all in the span of 2 minutes. All of them went against the Bills, and now all of them were, question. You could argue either side. It just you could also argue not throwing flags on any of them, and the refs decided they were going to decide the game. Like, whether they were making the right call or not, I did not feel that any of them were blatant. I mean, obviously the pick was, that's just a 50-50. You got to make a call there. But the flags in particular, I don't feel like any of them were worth a flag, but they felt their need to decide the end of the game, and it just ruined what was an amazing game, in my opinion.
Yeah, it was tough, especially watching somebody who had a little bit of a vested interest. I had a future on the Bills, but I think it was twofold for me. It was, number one, I am tired of the inconsistency in the reffing. Again, I think some of those calls were justified. If you look by the rule book, sure, those are justified, the right calls. It's the fact that they were calling almost nothing the entire game, and then all of a sudden, okay, now we're going to get down to late hits and on pass interference. I agree, the interception You could rule that 100 times, and I'm probably going to agree with you no matter which way you go, just because it was that close. I don't think that's the play. I know that's what everyone's focusing on. I don't think that's the play that decided it. I think also going under the radar a little bit is, and this will kind of lead us into the discussion of the offseason for the Bills, but this Bills team had problems. I mean, the Bills teams of the last few years would have gone into Denver and won that game by 10. But this year they couldn't. The defense has taken a step back. The offense is all Josh Allen and James Cook and the run game, right? Like he has no help on the receiving side. And I even think that at times Joe Brady, while we like him, we think he's a good play caller, feels that he has to do more with these play calls. So they run a ton of these like hook and lateral plays and other weird stuff that you just kind of feel like they're reaching. They're doing everything they can. And then Josh ends up being, Superman. And we saw it at the end of the half, which that was kind of the whole thing put together in one play. Is a bad decision to have the offense trying to move the ball instead of just kneeling it out and going to half. Josh Allen trying to make it a play, pushing all the buttons, like we like to say, fumbling, giving Denver the 3 points that ended up being the difference in the game right before the half. So all of that being said, I think there's a lot to unpack with the Bills this offseason. I understand from the fans' perspective that they feel like they were screwed by the refs. Totally get it. And Buffalo fans, I feel for you. But I really do hope that they figure out their stuff going into the offseason.
Yeah, I think you made a point about the GM keeping his job and McDermott not keeping his job. I think McDermott actually did some rehabilitation to his image this year with all the injuries they had on defense and the fact that, quite honestly, Josh Allen held them together, James Cook, and that they had a pretty good season overall, at least in the regular season. If you just look at their draft history and why, like you try to think about why they're struggling so much and relying so much on Josh Allen, they can't get separation. There's a reason Joe Brady has to do all these creative, quirky, maybe over-the-top things on offense. Keon Coleman can't run routes, can't get separation. They're relying on Curtis Samuel. They're treating Khalil Shakir as a number one receiver when he's probably a number 3. Like, this team is just void of talent at the skill position outside of James Cook. I think McDermott will find another job. There's way too many openings for him not to, but I think there's a lot of parallels to the situation in New York with the Giants and our shock around Joe Sheen keeping his job and then Bean keeping his job with the Bills. The draft history is very spotty, especially the last 3, and I find it very interesting who's going to end up there in Buffalo, because I'll touch on it when I talk about John Harbaugh. The reporting structure is very clear in New York. John Harbaugh reports to the Mara family. He does not report to Joe Sheen. And having that kind of instability to start a head coaching regime is crazy to me. But good luck, Buffalo. I do think that there are better options out there, at least from an offensive mind perspective, but I think there's also a lot worse you can do than McDermott.
Yeah, one final note on the Bills' job, and then I'll throw it to Jake for his last thoughts, but I am curious to see where they go with their hire. I think the obvious answer for a lot of Bills fans is twofold. It's either keep Joe Brady around, promote him to head coach, keep the good vibes rolling with the offense, have him find a new DC, and then hopefully he has enough good standing in the organization he gets along with Bean. That would be the hope. I know the other thing I keep seeing people float around, which this one I'm a little more questionable of, but is bring back Brian Dable, right? Those were the good old days. That was when the offense was humming at its best. He had his moments in New York, and again, you could argue that his issues were the instability in New York that led to his downfall, and he never got his quarterback, whereas obviously he has that in Buffalo. So we'll see what happens with Buffalo. I think both of those would make sense if they did it. I think that you could also easily see them taking kind of a bigger swing on a little lesser name, giving them a fresh shot. So, Jake, any final thoughts on the Bills before we hop into breaking down the rest of the coaching carousel?
Yeah, I was just gonna add to what Drew said about McDermott. Is it's kind of like the Harbaugh situation where it's like he is a good coach, and obviously he's gonna find another job. It's just you have a 2-time MVP quarterback, and you've had 8 seasons in a row of not being able to take the next step, not being able to make any progress. So it's just the team kind of just has to make a decision where it's like, we got to change something. Now, I agree. I think it should have been in the general manager position, but I do think that I agree with what the Bills organization did, which is make a change, because it's the same thing in Baltimore, that you just can't be stuck not moving forward at all.
Yeah, I think that pretty much sums it up. I think there were a lot of coaches that were let go or allowed to step down this year for the sake of change. And so now we're seeing obviously a record number of job openings. And I think we're going to see a lot of coaches getting new jobs right away, which is kind of uncommon sometimes where, normally if there's only 4 or 5 openings, guys have to take a year off or they have to go take a coordinator job. I think we're going to see a lot of these names, the McDermotts of the world, obviously already the Harbaughs of the world, getting right back into coaching in other spots and being able to make a name for themselves right away. So it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. But enough of the Bills. Obviously, we've been dancing around it enough. We'll jump into him first, which is John Harbaugh. But we just want to kind of play catch up on all of the hiring news of what's happened this week in the last week or so since we recorded in the NFL. There's been about 7 jobs now filled. A bunch still remain open. Those jobs between some offense coordinator jobs and head coaching jobs we wanted to highlight. Again, John Harbaugh, the new Giants coach, that was the biggest domino to fall. Now we've kind of seen all the pieces kind of fall into place. Obviously, the Bills have now kind of emerged as that top number 1 job opening. Kevin Stefanski, as Drew predicted a couple of weeks ago, Falcons head coach. We love that pick. I don't know how much we're going to talk about that today because, go back a couple of weeks, listen to our thoughts there. We think that's a home run hire for the Falcons, if we're being honest. A quieter hire that I think is signaling a little bit of a change in the mentality in Miami is the Dolphins hiring Jeff Hafley. The Titans bring in Robert Saleh, one of the more underwhelming hires, particularly as a team with a young quarterback. But at the end of the day, he at least did prove he could, make chicken salad from chicken shit with the 49ers defense this year. So, we'll see what he can do in Tennessee. And then a few offensive coordinator hires, one of which we'll touch on. Mike McDaniel is now the new offensive coordinator in LA for the Chargers. Drew Petzing is now the new offensive coordinator in Detroit for the Lions. And probably the most under the radar, just because he was promoted from inside and who really cares about this organization right now. But David Blow, if anyone remembers him from his Thanksgiving start a few years ago, is now the offensive coordinator for the Washington Commanders. We're not going to cover that one. I'm going to be honest with you. Talk about uninspiring. That's uninspiring. And then, again, there's a bunch of openings still out there. So, Drew, again, like we said, we've danced around it enough. I know you want to talk about John Harbaugh and the Giants. Take it away. What are your thoughts on that hire and where you see that going from here?
Talked about it a little bit. It's one of the more interesting situations because I do think the Giants' job as a whole is very attractive with Dart there, with Scadaboo, with Neighbors. They got pieces on defense. They have all their draft picks. It's a very attractive situation, obviously a big market. And prior to this long stretch of destruction and poor play outside of the one blip from Dayball and Daniel Jones, the Maher family is considered at least competent owners. I wouldn't say they're like dumpster fire level Jerry Jones, Cleveland Browns level type stuff, but I talked about the dynamics of the reporting structure. So he's going to report directly to the owner, not to the GM, which makes me think that everything is relying on this 5th overall pick from Joe Sheen and his job security. That if he doesn't hit on this one, he's likely gone. If they have another bad year, he's probably gone. John Harbaugh's not going anywhere. He's locked in. I think it's a great hire for the Giants overall, as he provides a lot of stability that they've been missing really since Tom Coughlin, I think, resigned, I want to say. I don't think he was fired, but yeah, I like the hire for them. I'm really curious to see if he goes the same route with his nonsense Greg Roman, all these like retread Raven hires that he's gone with in the past. I pray that Zach Orr is not the defensive coordinator of the Giants next season for their sake, but really excited to see what they do at 5. I think you'll likely see them go either receiver, maybe Carnell Tate, Jordan Tyson, or maybe they go tackle to plug the right side to fill in for the aforementioned Evan Neal that should not be rostered by an NFL team anymore. But that was also a Joe Sheen pick if anyone wanted to know that. But exciting time for the Giants. The division is in a weird spot. The Cowboys are disastrous. We don't know if Dan Quinn is the guy in Washington, and Philadelphia is burning to the ground, asking for a new OC and potentially Sirianni out if they don't start off hot next year. So, yeah, I like the hire for the Giants.
I think it's a pretty solid hire for the Giants. And you're right that now I'm someone who will always say, let's shoot for the flashy hire. But in the Giants case, they needed stability. They got arguably the second or most stable coach that was on the market, depending on how you feel about Mike Tomlin. That'd be the only other guy I'd throw in there. But I think, we tend to look a little more favorably to Harbaugh in that case. And I mean, the disrespect for the newly hired David Blau in Washington with that division, I is crazy from you. But no, I think that if he knocks his coordinator picks out of the park, the Giants are definitely going to be the team everybody's looking at next year. Especially that second year. You're looking for that second year leap. Jackson Dart showed flashes. Keep him healthy. Some better play calling. All of a sudden, I think that very quickly you could see Harbaugh fixing that place up. And I agree. It's his show. Joe Sheen is kind of just there because I don't know if it's because the Maras like him personally or what the reasoning is, but everything's running through Harbaugh. I would not even be surprised that if at some point this season he says, I'm done, don't want to deal with this guy anymore, doesn't like his draft returns, like they could just pull the plug on Shane at any time. Jake, any thoughts on Harbaugh before we move on to the other hires?
Nothing to add, really. I agree with what you guys are saying. I think it's a good fit for the Giants, and I think it's going to really depend on the coordinators he puts in place, and what they do in the draft this year.
So speaking of coordinators, we want to highlight a couple of these coordinator hires that I think some good, some bad. One in particular that I think, speaking of Harbaugh, I think Jim sneaky won the coaching cycle with this hire, bringing in Mike McDaniel to be his offensive coordinator in LA. Jake, I know you've got a lot of thoughts on this. How are you feeling? Do you agree with me that it's a home run? What are you looking at?
Yeah, I think this is a terrific hire. We said it a couple weeks ago. I think McDaniel's a really good coach. He's just not a head coach type of coach. I feel like he's a great offensive coordinator. He's got a good mind for offensive scheme and play calling, and I feel like it's exactly what the Chargers needed. I've said multiple times before on how good of a coach I think Jim Harbaugh is. Think he was fantastic in San Fran. Obviously, he was good in Michigan. And we've already seen what he's been able to do and transform this Chargers team into a potential winning team. Obviously, they had horrific offensive line injuries this year, which caused them to struggle down the stretch and in that Patriot game in particular, but they still put up a really good fight. Harbaugh controlled that game. Their defense completely stopped Drake May and gave their offense chances. They didn't have any answer, and that's why I think this hire is so great. I feel like McDaniel's going to come in, he's going to restructure the offense, he's going to get Herbert back on track, and if they can just stay healthy, stay out of the medical tent next year, I think this team is very scary.
For sure, and this roster, other than at receiver, where there are some question marks really moving forward besides Ladd McConkey, I would say, this offense is set up to suit his scheme very well, assuming the offensive line is healthy. He's a run-first guy. He loves to do a lot with the vertical and outside running game. I think Omarion Hampton will be a very useful back. He's always been a guy to use multiple backs. I think this year the Chargers proved they have a good two-prong approach with Hampton and Vidal when they're both healthy. Obviously, Justin Herbert, we know he can air it out if he's got time. So again, barring the injuries on the offensive line, I think if they can figure out some stuff at receiver, this offense could really be productive, and I think that his run-first style complements a lot of the way Jim Harbaugh likes to think. To me, the key to the Chargers really is, can they, by the grace of God, keep Jesse Minter in the building one more year? All of a sudden, if you have Minter on defense and McDaniel on offense, that'd be incredible. But Drew, what are your thoughts on the McDaniel hire? Do you think this is a needle mover, especially with, the Chiefs on the ropes? And the Broncos, we'll see how their season ends. But do you think this is kind of that last bump over the hill that the Chargers needed, or what are your thoughts?
Huge needle mover for the Chargers. I mean, it's a great scheme fit. McDaniel's really, for all the gimmicks and the stuff within the Dolphins offense with Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, it's a run-first offense. Shanahan components, like, are very much part of that tree and part of that type of football, and it plays right into what Jim Harbaugh wants to do anyway. So I think this will be a great fit. Ultimately, what the Dolphins probably could have had set up in Miami if they had just taken Justin Herbert. I think he fits better within McDaniel's scheme. And at the end of the day, we need to take some off of Herbert's shoulders. They are relying kind of the same way the Bills are on Josh Allen in a lot of aspects. Like, you have Hampton, you get another receiver, you plug in at right guard, which was atrocious all season. You get your tackles back. I think this is a great move for the Chargers. Don't be surprised if I'm coming on here talking about Chargers division futures, Chargers Super Bowl. I think everybody probably will be, but I love it. I love it for the Chargers. Good for them.
I feel like the team and the receivers also just fit so well. Like he McDaniel loves to run run first, but then like play action and go over the top. And obviously, with Tua, that's his biggest weak point, which is why they struggled a lot. Herbert has a great deep ball, and their receivers really like to stretch the outsides. But I just think like the team itself, like if they just get one more outside receivers, I feel like outside receiver to complement Johnson, I feel like they will have exactly like what he needs to formulate his scheme around.
The other guy going a little under the radar that's going to benefit from this too is Oronde Gadsden. Mike McDaniel has proven, whether it was with Darren Waller this year or Jonnu Smith in the past, that he will use his tight ends. He'll get creative. He'll get them in space. He'll throw screens to them, do a lot of stuff that benefit weaker tight ends than I think Gadsden has the potential to be. So you throw that in the mix too. I think we can get really dynamic. It's going to look a whole lot different than we have seen out of this honestly archaic scheme that, again, like Drew said when we were talking about John Harbaugh, the Harbaughs love these archaic, over-the-hill offense coordinators. This is a whole different look, and it just, again, it proves what we've said about Jim Harbaugh and that staff, that they are willing to do what needs to be done to modernize the team. So I agree with these guys, what they said. I think it's going to be a home run hire, and Drew's probably right, going to be the ones we're all going to be stomping for this team come next year.
Being able to look in the mirror and see that like things are outdated with that run first approach, but it's like Greg Roman, good riddance. Please don't. Nobody hire that guy, please. So sick of hearing about Greg Roman.
Yeah, he's your boy Collinsworth's favorite offensive coordinator to talk about.
God, dude. Talk about another dated I don't want to hear from anymore, but we don't need to go into that.
Yeah, we don't have to do the announcer bashing this week. So the final coordinator, a little bit under the radar, and I actually think this is not a very good hire for the team who made it, but the Lions bringing in Drew Petzing, the former Arizona Cardinals offensive coordinator, to fill into that offensive coordinator spot. We know it was covered in ad nauseum that Dan Campbell and the Lions just didn't have the juice on offense that they'd had with Ben Johnson leaving. Again, I understand those are shoes that are nearly impossible to fill. Ben Johnson has quickly proven top three offensive mind in the league, if not higher than that. Drew Petzing in Arizona picked up what already was a pretty solid offense and didn't do anything with it other than, turn Trey McBride into an all-pro, which you could argue he was already going to be anyway. This offense has been so detrimental to Marvin Harrison as a number one receiver. Now, you could argue we saw the emergence of Michael Wilson. I think that was more of just like this weird free flow, go out and street ball energy that the Cardinals had most of the second half of the year when they had given up. But this is very inspiring to me. You watch their offense, their bottom half of the league in motion, which is exactly the opposite of what Ben Johnson does and what made the Lions offense so lethal when they were running at their best. It scares the daylights out of me for what it's going to look like for Amon-Ra St. Brown with how bad and how poorly they use these outside receivers. Now, again, at least if they put them in the slot, there's more potential, but all the Cardinals want to do is run fade balls to their outside receivers. That's not where Amon-Ra is at his best. And the run game was good 2 years ago. Now, obviously, I know the Cardinals, poor offensive line play, a myriad of injuries at the running back position. But when they lost their run game coordinator to the Cowboys this last year, the run game took a step back. So it does have me concerned for, the engine of that Lions offense is the run game. And then most of all, too, we saw it at times this year with the Cardinals, too. They're better when they have a mobile quarterback. That's not Jared Goff. I mean, the offense he runs was definitely, he was brought in to be an offensive coordinator suited to Kyler Murray. We saw at times Jacoby Brissett, just that lack of mobility led to, again, that lack of motion, having to chuck up deep balls. There's a lot of concerns for me with this one. I don't think the Lions got that home run hire that they were looking for. Now, again, maybe they proved me wrong. Maybe the talent on the Lions is just so much better and consistent than what the Cardinals had that this ends up working out. But for a team that you would have thought would have been the premier offensive coordinator job, a team that could have used a Mike McDaniel type hire, to not get it, and in fact get, in my opinion, a guy who probably shouldn't have been on the top of anyone's list for offensive coordinator hires, I'm worried for this team.
Yeah, so underwhelming that I had to do a quick Google search to make sure I was thinking it was the right guy. In fact, yes, it was the Arizona Cardinals offensive coordinator. Yeah, pretty underwhelming. I think you made up a lot of good points around what the Cardinals focused on offense this year, and there's a lot going on there. Like you said, the running back injuries, the benching / injury of Murray. So maybe not what he was envisioning at the start of the season, and obviously Harrison is kind of disappointed in some aspects as well. But Yeah, I have major concerns about this Lions team. I was not shy about expressing those throughout the season. When anytime you see a head coach take over play calling, it always pops up a red flag in my head. And I don't know how involved Dan Campbell will be next season in the offensive game planning, if he will remain the play caller, but I will be taking a good long look at their win total and evaluating the rest of the division's success against them. So yeah, not high on this hire for the Lions.
I think you guys summed it up. I will add that I Petzing has just been he's a very straightforward offensive mind, like doesn't do a lot of extra stuff. And that's kind of like what the Lions do really well is, you got to get Gibbs out of the backfield with some creative play, get him into open space, get Amon-Ra into open space, get Williams into open space. And I feel like his type of offense is not like suited to that play style. He kind of is, like you said, straightforward, run the ball, throw to your outside receivers. And don't do a lot of motion. And I feel like that really hurts like all the talent that the Lions have. So I don't understand this hire at all.
I don't want to bore everybody by doing another 10 minutes on X's and O's, but the one final note I have on it is his offense is also very shotgun focused, and Jared Goff is way better under center. Just way better. We've talked about it before. I don't see it fitting. Now, again, that's a change you can make. Talking about looking in the mirror as a coach, I think that's a change you can make. You can obviously make a lot of your scheme work under center with a shotgun. I think you're going to have to do that. Otherwise, Jared Goff, if we see regression out of him, that could be a really bad year for the Lions.
Being under center is what changed Jared Goff's career with Sean McVay. Like, it was not very heavy shotgun, but more heavy shotgun with Jeff Fisher and the previous regime when McVay came in, and even when he's been in Detroit under Campbell and Ben Johnson. Like, the under center component of Jared Goff's game, the play action off of the successful running game. Anytime we do a Lions breakdown, we say, can you slow down their big plays and can you get pressure on Goff from the interior? And nothing about drop back shotgun offense inspires any kind of confidence in me about that Lions offense. So yeah, don't love it.
We've done enough rambling about head coaches and offensive coordinators. We'll keep touching base every week on these into the offseason as everything kind of finds its water level here. And all these coaching hires probably will be concluded in the next week or two. So we'll get to the rest of them when they happen. But that's that for us, and we'll hop into the rest of the show here in just a second. Well, now that we got the discussion part of the show out of the way, this is normally where we would jump into best bets. But as we said at the top of the video, at the top of the show, this season is down to 2 games, and it's just too hard to find best bets. We're going to call it there. We're going to say that we're done. We've given out all of our best bets. Frankly, we wish we would have called it 2 weeks ago. This number would sound a lot better. But to wrap it up for the year, we are still positive on the season. 32, 27, and 1. That's 54%. If you're counting it out on a unit basis, it was plus 2.1 units this season. That is above the Mendoza line for profitability. We'll take that as our inaugural year in the NFL as a show. So we'll give a quick golf clap to us for that one. Obviously, it did not end the way we wanted it to, but we did a lot of work. We found some winners. We're going to continue, handicapping not only the NFL, but other sports into the football offseason. And then we'll be back come next season to put in another best bet season of NFL bets. So we're excited for that. But we just wanted to take just a moment, recap everything. And then obviously we're still going to break these games down. But first, if you haven't already and you are enjoying this video, please do leave a like on the video. Hit that subscribe button so that way you never miss any of our future uploads. And then hit that notification bell so that way you get alerted when those updates come out. So that way you can see our stuff for the next 2 weeks for the Super Bowl. And then as we talked about into the offseason, you can stay up to date with everything else that we're doing. So first up on Sunday, we have the AFC Championship. It's the Broncos plus 5.5 versus the Patriots. Total is sitting at 41.5 as we speak. The spread on this game has gone up and down a little bit. Obviously, the Bo Nix injury leaving things a little bit in flux. Total has pretty much stayed cemented right around that number. Maybe a half point here or there, but right around that number. We're going to start off with our opinions on the spread. Then we'll jump into the total and some props we like as well. But leading up on the spread, this has not gone well for us when this happens this playoff so far. But boys, we all like the Broncos plus 5.5.
The main reason for the Broncos is I feel like it's just a big overreaction. If Bo Nix was playing at home, the Broncos would probably be a 2-point favorite. Is Bo Nix worth 7 points, 7.5 points? I don't think so. I think that is a ridiculous line movement, and especially with this defense and how the Patriots have struggled against good defenses, I feel like the Broncos are the spot here. Now, that doesn't mean I think they're going to win or anything. I feel like this game could be a lot closer than people think. I feel they're going to play the same style that Houston play defensive, but it all comes down to will Stidham throw pick sixes like CJ Stroud did, or will he play conservative, run the ball, and this game could be interesting.
Yeah, I think Jake said a lot about the overreaction part and completely in line there. I think ultimately what this game comes down to, and we've seen it with Milton Williams being back on the field, the huge difference in splits as far as the Patriots' run defense is concerned. I think it's around like 1.4, 1.5 yards before contact difference when he's on the field versus off the field. So if the Broncos are not able to run the ball with Harvey, I do think we then get into a situation where we're seeing a lot of drop back with Jared Stidham. And I do think that even though Gonzalez probably shadows Sutton and he probably is taken out of the game a bit, the Broncos have a plethora of options that are playing pretty well, and they have kind of built plays around for with Marvin Mims, Troy Franklin, some of these other young guys. So I do think there's a path to success, even if you have to rely on Stidham heavily. But ultimately, the way I look at the other side of the ball as well is that Drake May has been under pressure in both games he's played against quality defenses, and it's resulted in turnovers. It's resulted in short fields for both the Chargers and the Texans. And if Stidham can just not turn the ball over the same way we saw Stroud and Herbert do, I do think they can stay in this game, keep it close. Another cold weather game. And I think May has looked impressive in pockets, but you can see that youthful, mistake-prone feel to his game right now. And with Will Campbell being a little shaky on the left side, I think there's going to be opportunities for this defense to create havoc and get turnovers that help their offense.
I see this game being won or lost in the trenches on both sides. We know the Patriots with Milton Williams stout against the run. Good news is Sean Payton this year with this Broncos offense kind of has just abandoned the run game, so it's not really going to change what they want to do. Now, you could argue that they'd want to rely on it more with Jared Stidham in there, but I think they're going to game plan around the fact that they only run the ball about 15 times a game. Some of those are obviously designed runs with Bo Nix, so maybe that changes things just a little bit because Stidham is not as mobile as Bo Nix. Drake May has a 45% pressure to sack ratio this year. That's not great. That's not great against the team that led the league in sacks this year. We saw Houston get after them with their nasty defense, and that's a team who will just rush for a lot. This Broncos team will run stunts. They'll send blitzes. They'll do a lot more that could confuse this already struggling offensive line. Drew mentioned it. Will Campbell has struggled since he came back. He's not the only guy on that offensive line that's struggling. I could see some potential for this Denver defense to really cause problems. Not to mention, what's the weakness of this Patriots offense? The fact that they don't really have a true wide receiver one. Well, guess what? You've got Pat Surtain out there to absolutely eliminate, whether it's Stephon Diggs, whether it's Booty, whoever they want to take out of the game, gone. Just count them gone with Surtain out there on the field. Now, all of a sudden, Drake May is trying to do a lot with a lot less against pressure in his face. And then, like we said, you're asking Jared Stidham to just not be as bad as CJ Stroud. That's a low bar. That's a really low bar. So I'll take the chances. In my opinion, this line should be 3.5. That's what I think this line should be with Jared Stidham. I agree that it's not a 7-point move from Bo Nix to Jared Stidham. So I think the Broncos are the right side here, despite the fact that it feels so obvious that this should be a Patriots roll spot. Now that we covered the spread, we're going to talk about the total of this game a little bit. Not really anything firm for us in this game. We do have some conflicting opinions, though, so we're going to go around the table real quick. Everyone's going to give their 2 cents. Drew, looks like you're leaning over. What's your thought?
Yeah, I'm torn on this one. Low total. And immediately my reaction is under. I think, okay, how is Sean Payton going to play this? It's going to be focused on trying to run the ball, shorten the game, play defense, blah, blah, blah. And then I go in deeper and think about my breakdown of havoc and turnover-worthy plays and all this thing. And I think a lot of short fields could lead this total over the same way you saw it play out in the Texans-Patriots game, which if there aren't even half the amount of turnovers, I mean, that game was a slop fest, that game goes under 9 times out of 10. So I think we see something similar in this game with two havoc-minded defenses. You shouldn't be able to run on either, so you'll see a lot more drop back, a lot more pressure on both quarterbacks, and I think the turnovers ultimately is what could potentially push this over and keeps me leaning that direction away from the under.
Jake, you're thinking under. What's your take here?
Yeah, I have the same thought process, but a different result, basically. I watched the game last week. I think it's going to be pretty much the exact same type of game. It's, Drake May, like you said, struggles against pass rush, struggles against good defenses. So I think that leans towards the under. I think the Broncos play much more conservatively, especially with the new quarterback. And so I think that leans towards the under. And I just feel like it's a very similar game, like you said, to the Houston game last week. The only difference is there were 8, 9, 10. I lost count of turnovers in that game, and Patriots had 14 points just completely off of turnovers. One was a pick six. The other was basically gave the ball in the red zone so they could score. So I think if there just aren't that many turnovers, aren't like pick sixes or all this extra stuff, I think this game goes under.
Yeah, I kind of find myself on this overlook as well. I get what Jake is saying with these turnovers. Basically, my thought process is pretty simple. You can't really run the ball in this game. The Patriots running game has just been, very underwhelming all year in general. Talked about the struggles that the Broncos are likely to have against this Patriots run defense. So I think we're going to see a lot of throwing the ball. To me, that means one of two things. Either turnovers, which means short fields, or we're going to see some explosive plays, and that means points. So I think there's a path here to get a lot of quick drives that result in touchdowns. And even if we have to settle for 3, it's not going to take a lot of time off the clock. It might be because of some incompletions. And all of a sudden, an already a little bit suppressed total due to the injury is definitely in play for two offenses that, for what it's worth, both offensive coordinators in this game, or at least play callers in this game, have been phenomenal this year with dialing up shots, dialing up special plays in big moments. I think that each of them are going to have a thing or two in their bag. I think maybe we see a trick play, especially out of a team like the Broncos who might need it. I think there's enough there that we get over. That will bring us to the prop angle for this game. So we kind of have a little bit of a variety here for those looking to get involved. Drew, you lead us off. You're looking at the passing prop in this game. What are you going with?
Yeah, I like Jared Stidham to go over his passing attempts, 30 and a half, 31 and a half, I think is where you're going to see that right now. Thinking here, I touched on it a little bit. Patriots splits with Milton Williams on the field and their run defense. I don't think you'll see success from the Broncos running the ball with RJ Harvey in this one. And I think ultimately they will have to rely on Jared Stidham to throw the ball, which I get is a scary proposition, but I think that's the route you'll see this game play out. And I don't think it's actually, like we talk about the line movement and the accounting for the loss of Bo Nix. Jared Stidham is not my favorite backup quarterback by any means, but I do think that he's been around the league long enough and that Sean Payton is a good enough offensive mind to scheme open receivers, tight ends, running backs, and I do think that he can have success in the passing game against this Patriots defensive unit. So that's why my angle. We're going over, especially if we get the game script where they're trailing. This is a dead shot prop. Like I think that's the perfect situation for this one.
Drew says trust the backup quarterback. Jake, you like the other quarterback in this game. What are you looking at?
Yeah, I'm looking at Drake May anytime touchdown. The reason I like this is what everybody's talked about already. Broncos run defense very good. So I don't think the Patriots will have as much success as they usually do on the ground. And we've discussed it. The Patriots do not have a lot of receivers. The Broncos run a lot of man coverage, and they have really good corners to cover these receivers. And when teams run a lot of man coverage, that leaves openings for the quarterback to scramble. I think that if the Patriots are going to win this game, I think they're going to win this game by Drake May being able to scramble outside the pocket, make plays, and gain yards on the ground himself. And so I like the look for him to score.
That's two different props, two different ways to play the quarterbacks in this game. I'm going to get a little gross with mine. I'm going to take Demario Douglas, a.k.a. Pop Douglas, over 15.5 receiving yards. This is a very low number. He's a guy that only catches a couple passes a game. So really what you're banking on is him to catch one of these longer balls down the seam, like he did last week against Houston, like he's done more often than not down the stretch of this season. The reason I like this is, as we talked about a little bit before, Pat Surtain erases wide receiver ones. Good news is Pop Douglas is not the number one receiver. Whether it's Booty, whether it's Stephon Diggs, whether they use him to guard the tight end in the slot, whatever they decide to do, it's not going to be Pop Douglas. So that means you're not at least having to go up against Surtain. And I think that this Patriots team knows that the only way you can attack a man-heavy defense like the Broncos is by attacking these nickel corners that struggle a little bit more in that man-to-man coverage. Drake May is great with the deep ball. I think we can definitely get all of this yardage on one play. So I'm going to take a shot at it. I think that Pop Douglas can get open down the seam like he has multiple times recently, catches a pass. Hopefully that's over 16 yards, and we cash this prop on one play. The second game on Sunday is this NFC Championship. Ask some, they might say this is the real Super Bowl. It is Seahawks minus 2.5 versus the Rams, total sitting around 46. We've got, again, some varying opinions on the spread. We're going to dive into all of them here. Jake, I'm going to have you go first. Looks like you like the home team here.
Yeah, I like the Seahawks. I've been a big fan of the Seahawks all year. I thought they were a great team. Midway through the season, I picked them to win the NFC, and now they have the opportunity to do that. If I was looking at this game just in a vacuum, Rams played 2 good games against the Seahawks, probably should have won both of those games, and they are the underdog. So everything points to the Rams side. It's just the Rams feel off. I don't know what it is. If it's Stafford's hand injury or Devontae Adams' hamstring injury or something, but their offense feels off. They just feel off in general, and the Seahawks are moving. And, you know, like any sport in the playoffs, it's who's cooking lately. And I feel like the Seahawks are really that team that just is firing on all cylinders. Their offense looks amazing. Their defense looks fantastic, completely shut out a great offense in the Niners last week. And I feel like they're going to get the job done.
I think I pretty strongly disagree here with my take on this game. I want to fade the narrative a little bit. I think the Rams were the best team most of the season. I know the Seahawks were right up there. But we saw the 2 games that these teams played. The Rams forced 4 turnovers on Darnold. The first game kind of handled the game. Second game, the Rams were up by 16, blew the lead in Seattle. Obviously, you hate to see something like that happen, but the Rams were up by 16 nonetheless and hung in that game the whole way, put up points on the Seattle defense. And that's the one key for me, is that both times these teams have played, you've seen the Rams be able to put up some points on the Seattle defense. The 13 personnel that McVay has been running has given a lot of trouble to this dialed-in nickel scheme that McDonald likes to run, and I think it just creates unique matchups, especially for guys like Puka inside and out, that not many other teams can put up against this Seattle defense. On top of that, I just don't know if it's because it's the Rams or maybe Darnold still has his struggles, but he's thrown 6 picks in 2 games against the Rams here. So is it potential that we finally see this pumpkin watch for Darnold come true? Maybe. At the end of the day, I think these are the 2 best teams in the league. I do agree that this is probably the true Super Bowl. So therefore, you got to give me the points in that game. I know they're the road team. I know this crowd's going to be juiced up, but I'll take the 2.5. I've seen some 3s pop up out there. If you can get a 3, absolutely grab it. But I'll be on the Rams in this game. So that leaves Drew. You going to break the tie for us, or do you not have a strong enough feeling to do that?
I hope and I pray for the Rams to move on in this one as a future holder of the Rams. I think you bring up a great point about Darnold's struggles against the Rams, because it dates back to last season as well in his playoff game with the Vikings. This scheme is clearly giving him issues, and it really didn't need him to do much in that Niner game. For me, I look at, and I'll get to it with my prop as well, you stop the running game, you force Darnold to beat you, and you've had proven that you can have success against this McDonald scheme by getting creative with the 13 personnel, utilizing your tight ends, and really just backpacking on Puka in the passing game a little bit in that regard. But I do give the edge special teams wise to the Seahawks. They're obviously at home. You saw what that environment was like last week after that Shaheed kickoff return. But I agree. I think the Rams are ultimately the better team. They just do feel like they're leaking a little bit of oil. It's the first time, I think, in NFL history that a team that has made the conference title game is 0-2 ATS heading into that. So take that what you will. Pray for me. Pray for the Rams.
I think what you guys are forgetting is the Seahawks no longer have a fullback holding their star running back from actually performing.
But
we saw what Kenneth Walker was able to actually do when they took the handcuffs off him. You think they're going to stop the run? Be ready.
You're going to hate my prop.
Yeah, and I know you were mentioning it, Drew. I do have a couple trends. I'm a trends guy, so I got to throw them in here at least a little bit in this show. But there are some negative trends towards the Rams. So, Jake, that does go in your favor.
Saw a bad stat about teams on 3 straight road games as well for the Rams because they technically played in Arizona in Week 18. That was not a positive Rams stat. I can't remember the exact record, but yeah, bad news for them across the board in the trends world.
All right, well, that'll bring us to the total. Again, nothing firm here. These totals are always pretty dialed in by this point, so it's really just kind of, do you have a feel here? Drew, it looks like you're leaning more towards some points in this game. What's your thought?
Yeah, not a strong conviction, but do lead towards the over, purely on the sense that, like I said, I think the Rams' game plan on defense is going to be stop Ken Walker, force Darnold to beat them. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't think he can. I think that Seahawks have enough talent, and if Darnold is healthy enough, that they should have success against a Rams secondary that is very banged up. I believe their top 2 corners may miss this game. At least they were not practicing as of today, but do think there's going to be some opportunities for the Seahawks in the passing game. And like I already said, I think the Rams will get right back to what they were doing in their first 2 matchups against Seattle. And I do think they'll go right into 13 and have some success on the ground as McDonald refuses to switch out of his nickel-based defense. So do think that leads to points. And if we get Pumpkin Darnold, maybe we get some short fields. That leads to more points as well. So yeah, I lean towards the over.
Yeah, I disagree with this. I watched the first game. Darnold threw 4 interceptions, and they still held him to 21 points. This defense is fantastic. I think that the scheme was not great going into that second game. I also think there was a couple of explosive plays that usually the Seahawks don't give up. So I would actually lean the under. Like I've said already, I think the Rams kind of like something feels off about them. Their offense has been struggling against teams that aren't good defenses, like the Bears. And so I think this game I tend to lean towards the under in this game because I just think that both coaches will play more conservative. This is, like Cole said, probably a Super Bowl like game for them. So I feel like they're going to be very conservative, and I feel like both these offenses are kind of one is going to be halted by an amazing defense, and the other one has glaring issues against the Rams.
I'm nothing if not a contrarian, so I'll take the under as well. I feel like the consensus thought process here is a lot of what Drew laid out, and it makes sense to me. You watch these teams play, you saw the points and all that craziness in the Thursday night game when they played. You know, just in general, the Seahawks are kind of humming right now, like we've said, whether or not you like or dislike the idea of Kenneth Walker being involved more, but it does change their offense. I think it makes it a little bit more dynamic, especially the passing game. Get all that. I think this is a tight played game. I think that likely you're not going to see as many turnovers out of Darnold. I agree that to a certain extent, this Rams offense and the way they have to play against Seattle is a little more methodical. I just think there's enough there that maybe we stay under this number. But again, it's more just a pure contrarian play for me. I'm just trying to fade the narrative here in this game as much as possible. That will bring us to the prop corner for this game. We've got a couple of props here. We teased it a little bit. Drew, you're looking at a running back in this game. What are you going with?
Yeah, I hate to do it, Jake, but I'm going to go with Ken Walker under 85.5 rushing yards in this one. I don't know what the game plan is if it's not to try to do everything to stop this running attack, because that's what the Seahawks, everything runs through their rushing game. And yeah, I just think this line is a bit too high. I get obviously Charbonnet's out, but I think you could see the Seahawks work in some other running backs in passing situations, third downs, 2-minute drill, which plays into Ken Walker being off the field a little bit more. And if there's enough focus around taking him out of the game on early downs, I think he stays under this number.
Jake, any thoughts on that one?
Hate it.
Yeah, I don't like it. I think Walker has a great game. But that's actually not the prop pick I'm going to pick. I like AJ Barner over receptions. He had 10 in the first matchup against them. I feel like they're going to focus mainly on the run in this game and then create schemes off of that for play action to short passes for Barner. Also, in general, if this is a closer game, tighter game, the Rams are getting a lot of pressure. AJ Barner's going to be a nice, easy target for Darnold, get quick passes. So I really like his over receptions in this game.
All right, that's an over reception prop from Jake. That's an under rushing yard prop from Drew. And I know I just said I'm a contrarian, but you know what? Everyone needs a sucker from time to time. And sure, I'll take the sucker bet here. I'll take the obvious play on the board. I'm going to go with Puka Nacua over 91.5 yards or 7.5 receptions, whichever you prefer. I think that if there's one thing we've seen both times these teams have played, the Seahawks struggle to defend Puka Nacua. Talked about the scheme before. It's this 13 personnel. It's the fact that they could put Puka inside and out. They use him in motion. They do a lot of things that cause a little bit of problem for the Seahawks defense. They get him open in screen game. He's such a good route runner that he can get himself open on the sidelines. And as we know, he is Matthew Stafford's absolute blanket, his comfort, his go-to guy. It's always been a thing with Stafford. He has one of those guys. It's no secret that it's Puka Nacua. And especially with Devontae Adams still looking a step slow, I think even in the red zone, Puka's a little bit more heavily relied on than he otherwise would be. I think there's just a lot of potential here. We know what he did the last time they played. He had 12 for 255 and 2 touchdowns. And even in the first game, despite it being a little bit lower scoring, he still went over this yardage number and landed one under the catch number. So I think either of these ways are good to play Puka. I think sometimes big players make big plays in big games. And you know what? Let's take the biggest player in this game. Well, there we have it. We have covered both games. We've thrown out the sides, the totals, the props, everything we like in these games. Hopefully we've given more than enough looks to give you guys some plays heading into the weekend. As far as the agree board, the only thing we had consensus on was the Broncos plus 5.5 in the AFC title game. For what it's worth, our agree's not been great in the playoffs. Hopefully this one turns it around for us. The only real head-to-head we had was in the NFC title game. Jake likes the Seahawks. I like the Rams. Drew says he's praying for the Rams for the sake of his future bet, but he's not going to be getting involved on the number itself. So we'll see how both of those play out here this weekend. Otherwise, like I said, that's the end of another episode. Obviously, ran a little bit longer on our discussion. We had less games to cover. At the end of the day, still doing everything we can to put out NFL content no matter what's going on in the league. But so that's the end of the episode. All that we have left is to thank you guys for tuning in for another week. We always enjoy doing this for everybody, especially as we head down the home stretch of the season here. If you did like the video, you made it all the way to the end, hit that like button so that way you tell YouTube that you're loving what we're doing and it feeds the algorithm for us. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that bell as well so you never miss one of our uploads. And obviously we're down to 2 games, but it doesn't mean we still can't cash some tickets. So we wish good luck to everybody on their wagers this weekend and a profitable conference championship.
There you go.
Let's have a week.